This last Tuesday, as I was sitting around with my lectionary group, one of the clergy said how ironic it is that in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the lectionary for the Hebrew selection of this week deals with the idea of God breathing life onto the dry bones, and that we are urged to stay home, socially distancing 6 feet away and from other people, and to not breathe or to cough on to someone else. It would seem that this story does not fly in the face of solid scientific evidence on how best to maintain a healthy body. Well, luckily this was a dream of the prophet Ezekiel. It is a metaphor for a nation that has experienced tremendous upheaval and isolation. The people that Ezekiel was writing to were in exile in the land of Babylon. Their city, Jerusalem, was decimated, and the temple where the Lord dwelt laid in ruins. These people had lost it all: the land promised to their ancestors, their place of worship, and their economic life. Very much like what we are currently experiencing with the coronavirus. The stock market continues to plummet. Over 20% of our workforce has been laid off or is on furlough because of the effects of quarantining. Store shelves are empty of basic necessities. Dare I say, you don't find TP paper on the shelves anymore, or Clorox wipes, or any other surface sanitizers. And although temporarily, we have, in essence, lost our own temple, the place where we are used to coming to worship. As a nation, we are currently a people filled with fear and anxiety. We have experienced panic buying over these past few weeks. We are not accustomed to walking into a supermarket and seeing row after row of empty shelving, from toilet paper products, meat counters, and to the dairy sections. We are seeing whole cities shut down with mandatory quarantining. We're dealing with a virus that has a long incubation period, which is allowing people infected to infect others unknowingly. These truly are frightening times. And I know, although I don't see it, you're probably rolling your eyes now and thinking to yourselves, we are so tired of hearing about this. This is all we hear on the news. Virus, virus, virus. Let's just talk about something else, something more pleasant. So I'm going to share with you the good news that comes out of this particular scripture. The professor of ancient Near Eastern studies at Fuller Theological Seminary, Christopher B. Hayes, shares these thoughts. He sees this story as a story of recreation. So if you think back in terms of the creation story in Genesis, we are told the Lord God formed man from dust from the ground. Humankind was just a pile of dust until God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And then the man became a living soul. What this is telling us is that the physical stuff is not really worth much without the spirit that is breathed by God. Ezekiel's recreation story is different, of course. As Ezekiel looks over this valley filled with dry bones, and then he uses this announcement from God to say, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. This is when the bones pull back together, and the suons and the muscles and the skin all happen and are reformed into human bodies. So for Ezekiel, he sees the spirit as more important than the body. In other words, when God first created man, he pulled the body together, then breathed life into it. In Ezekiel's story, he sees that without the breath of God, the body doesn't exist. But once he breathes God's word onto these dry bones, they pull back together and life is reinstated. Because this story was written for a specific people, it is a story of a rebirth for the Hebrew nation. Remember, they're in exile. But it is also a story applicable to any nation and any group of people who have experienced a death, a sense of abandonment by God, truly a loss of spirit, of life, vitality. Although I did not consciously make this choice when I was going into ministry, my ministry has been in the area of revitalization of church congregations. Every church that I have served over my years in active ministry has been with churches that had lost its focus, its vitality, its spirit. Out of the 5 churches that I have served, and you are one of those 5, you're being included, I have had the joy and the wonder of seeing God's breath come back into these congregations. Maybe that's why I can relate so easily to this story of the dry bones. Most pastors who have come out of seminaries over the past 25 years have given a lot of energy in trying to help congregations move out of a mindset that church should be done like it was in the 1950s. A mindset that somehow sees that decade was the optimum mode for spiritual growth. So I ask you this question. In what world does doing things the way that they were done 70 years ago still work? It doesn't. Every church that I've served, I have had to push into using, at the very minimal, some multimedia within their worship experiences. But with the COVID-19 virus, in less than 2 weeks, almost every church in the United States is now holding services and Bible studies and meetings via live streaming. With all of the fear and illness and the death that this horrible virus has brought into humanity, I see it happening, I see it hoping to move the church out of a set of behaviors that has been a slow death to the church in our country. Just last Friday, I had a video chat with a young man in South America who is searching for a God that loves him in a way that he loves God. But he has grown up being taught that God could not love somebody who was gay. Technology is the link between our meeting. It has come because I have changed one of my work habits that is coming out of this current isolation. Out of my concern to be able to connect in some small way with people, I have been streaming on Facebook Live a devotional thought each morning. From this simple act and putting it out on the web, this young man has found someone with a message that talks about God's love that is resonating with him. I'm hoping that he was able to join us this morning in worship. I know he asked for the link, and hopefully he was able to join. Right now, I can't see everybody who's online. But because he is looking for a faith community in which he can connect to, and to feel that breath of God's Spirit upon him. This is what modern technology is doing. God took dry bones and brought back life to them. The story is about what happens when God breathes his Spirit into us. It doesn't have to come in a physical gathering. God came in dreams long ago, and God can also come through modern technology. Don't you think it's time to let God's Spirit breathe upon us and to let go of the old ways of life that no longer work? In this story, new life comes alive by the prophet speaking life into those dry bones. By invitation of God, Ezekiel was asked to imagine the possibilities of the bones coming to life. The lesson for us today is when faced with impossibilities, new life comes out through imagination. The promise of new life means accommodating a new way for God to be at work in a world and in our lives. New life is the place where hope transforms what is into what can be. The gift of new life is fully attached to the breath of the divine. This story of resurrection is a story for the church today, a story of new hope, of new possibilities, of new life. A story of new ways of thinking and new ways of being in the world, new ways of living in community, even halfway across the world, new ways of embracing God, new ways of understanding God's world, all facilitated by the presence of the Spirit. The breath and the Spirit of God, let it breathe on us. Amen.